Hey y'all, hey, it's JJ Conway. Welcome to Building Wealth Together, where our goal is to help you walk in abundance and leave a legacy. It's Mindset Monday, where we take the best teachings on mindset, motivation, and leadership and apply them to your life. This helps you get past the past and grow forward into abundance. Let's get into it. Before the episode begins, let me remind everyone that my family does a lot of resetting during the summer. And so what you're about to hear is an excerpt from the Women Building Wealth Together conference. And if you'd like more information about what you heard, you can go to jjclink.com/VIP. And oh, by the way, if you want to make sure that you are the first to know when we start going live again in September, get on my mailing list. That's at jjclink.com/list. Now let's get into the show.
Hello, my name is Kamille Thomas, and I am an author, editor, copywriter, and content creator. Before I became an entrepreneur, I spent 25 years in the Air Force as a non-destructive inspection technician in the aircraft maintenance career field. I'm happily retired these days, and I'm loving my current journey of doing what I love. Writing is my passion, and I love helping to give others a voice and helping them tell their stories through words. And I know that that's definitely my purpose. So today, during this Women Building Wealth conference, I'm going to be talking about how negative money talks, or the lack of money talks, left me with no money and how that affected my self-worth. So I'll jump right into it. If you grew up like I did, the phrases that I'm about to say are probably very familiar to you. Money wasn't really talked about in my house. And if it was talked about, it was usually in a negative had a negative connotation. And the conversations between, my mom or some of the other adults and I went something like this. Hey, Mom, can I have some money to go to the mall? What? You think money grow on trees? I don't have any money for that. Or sometimes it was something like this. I didn't get to say anything. But as we approached the store and we walked in, my mom would say, when we go into the store, don't look at nothing, don't touch nothing, and don't ask me for nothing because I ain't got nothing. I don't have no money to get y'all nothing. Okay. Or maybe this one is familiar to a lot of people. Oh, you want McDonald's, huh? So do you have some McDonald's money? Oh, you don't? Well, what makes you think I do? Yeah. So growing up, I watched both of my parents struggle with money, and I often refer to my early life as the riches to rags era. See, my father was in the Air Force, and me and two of my sisters were born in Okinawa, Japan. I remember being very happy in my early years. Money was never an issue. Sometime around 1981, when I was about 4 years old, my dad got orders to March Air Force Base in California. And so we moved there, and life was still good. Like, I remember my house. I remember my Raggedy Ann and Andy dolls and bedroom set. I remember my strawberry shortcake scratch and sniff dolls. I remember my Chips motorcycle that I rode around, the power motorcycle. Yeah, I have one of those that I rode around the cul-de-sac with my neighbor and friend. I remember the snickerdoodles and the smell of those cookies permeating through my house when my mom used to bake. I remember the muscadine grapes that my dad used to pick from the vineyard on his way home that he would share with us. And I remember trying to catch frogs with this colander that had these large holes in it, and the frog was jumping out of it. And so we spent the day running around chasing after this frog, and we didn't catch him. And then I remember my mom moving my younger sister and I, to San Diego with my maternal family while my dad was beginning his transition into retirement. And life was still good. I was surrounded by my family. I had lots of friends, and I was a happy child. And when my dad moves to San Diego post-retirement, we eventually, my parents bought and we moved into a 5-bedroom, 3-bathroom home in a nice neighborhood. And my dad, I remember him taking us every weekend. We would go to Wild Animal Park and Knott's Berry Farm, Magic Mountain, Disneyland, SeaWorld, and every other attraction that Southern California had. And my mom stayed home and she cleaned the house until it was spotless. And all was well until it wasn't. And then out of nowhere, my parents brought us all into the living room, sat us down, and announced that they were getting divorced. And this is where I began learning about money, or rather learning about the lack of it. So when they divorced, it seemed like everything fell apart. Like we had to move out of our beautiful home and move into a very small 3-bedroom apartment in a not so good neighborhood. But after a couple of months, too many fights and some serious criminal activity, we moved again. Different apartment complex, same scenario. And then we moved again and again and again. And the cycle kept repeating itself, but the spaces we moved into got tinier and tinier. Not to mention, even my dad found himself homeless at one point in time. So you can imagine how tight things were for us. Well, my mom, she was doing the best she could do to take care of 5 and sometimes 6 kids on her meager income. But that also meant that at times there wasn't enough money to pay the light bills, the water bills, to buy groceries, or to give us lunch money. And by the time I was in high school, I figured out a clever way to pay for my food. So a couple of my friends had cars, and at my school, we also had off-campus lunch. So as long as I could scrounge up about 25 cents, at least 25 cents, I had about a 90%, probably more after a while, chance of eating a good lunch. And so what my friends would do was they would take me to Little Caesars. They would go to McDonald's and I would go to Little Caesars because I had an opportunity to get my lunch for free. I would play that Simon Says game that, you get so many points and you can get free breadsticks or free salad or something like that. But I got so good that I won a personal pan pizza almost every single day. And on the few days that, I didn't make it to the personal pan pizza level, I at least got an order of breadsticks and that good old marinara sauce that soothed my stomach for the day. And in the very beginning, when I started doing that, the first 1, 2, 3 times that I didn't get anything, it sent me in an overdrive. I would literally dream of playing that game every night. And I got so good at it that as soon as the employees saw me coming, they began to make my pizza. And my hunger was fueled by, fueled a determination in me that by any means necessary, I was going to get lunch. All right. So I learned how to be poor and still get what I needed. I had a lot of examples around me on how to live poor and survive. I didn't have a lot of examples, though, on how to rise above the poverty line, stay there, and become successful. But deep down, I knew it was always something that I wanted. I desired that for myself. And I knew that I never wanted my children to experience the struggle of poverty the way I did. And I knew that long before I had children. So I moved away from my parents in California, and I found myself in Georgia my senior year in high school. So I had to work to buy everything that I needed, to include my school supplies, my clothes, my hair, my food, my whatever I needed. I had to pay for that. And things were going okay. Even though I still wasn't really settled where I was, they were going okay. And then devastation hit. So at the end of my senior year, I had a fight that left me unable to complete any finals. So I graduated with a 1.6 GPA. Yes, this girl. And no college would touch me. No college wanted that, 1.6 barely scraping out of school GPA. But I knew I needed to get out of that town ASAP. So right after high school, I decided to join the Air Force. And as I was leaving, an unknown kidney condition disqualified me the day that I was leaving to go to boot camp. So they had to call my recruiter, tell my recruiter to come back and pick me up. And they also told me that I wasn't just disqualified for that time, but I would be disqualified for life because the Air Force did not accept people with my condition. And I was devastated, y'all. I was like, I don't want to continue to live here, and I don't want to live the way that I'm living. And I wanted out. And I wanted out so bad that I went back to my recruiter and I begged him and I pleaded for him. I said, can you do anything? Can you ask somebody? Can you just tell them I'm gonna be all right? I won't complain about my condition, even though it doesn't work like that. But I was like, I won't complain. I won't do anything. Can somebody please get me back in? And the answer was no. But I persisted and I kept nudging him. Actually, I kept nagging him. And because I had to go, I had to get out of there. And so I was like, can somebody do something? So finally, after 5 months and a ton of waivers, the Air Force let me back in. And I couldn't wait to leave and start a new life. But that was very short-lived. my aspirations of joining the Air Force and going through the commissioning program and making that good commission money, you know what I mean, that officer money, it was real short-lived. About a month after arriving to my first base, I found myself pregnant. I was young, I was single, and I was broke with a baby on the way. I hadn't even learned my job, yet here I was. And so all of my money fears came rushing back to the forefront of my mind because I didn't want my children to struggle like I did. But I also knew that the struggle was coming because I was broke. And it was one thing to struggle by myself, but it was another thing when I realized that I had someone to care for. And the only person that she had was me. And so the thought of being poor scared me. So I spent the next 7 months trying to figure out what I was going to do. Thankfully, by the grace of God, I found a small apartment that was $260 a month. And it was a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment. And I had it cost $10 for the water and $50 to $60 a month for electricity. And with the housing that the Air Force was giving me, the housing stipend, I brought in maybe about $1,200 a month at the time because I was just an airman, one stripe. And so after paying rent, utilities, car notes, insurance, gas, food, daycare, and taking care of the basic necessities, I was in the red more often than the green. I was stuck, y'all, and I was broke. I didn't like where I was, and just the thought of being broke, it scarred me. It scared me. And then on the flip side, the thought of having money was even more terrifying. I felt like I wouldn't know what to do if I had money because I had never had an example of that. And I didn't want to have another riches to rags story again. I had already been through that, and I didn't want to go through that. So I did what I call skimming. All right. So I just put just enough money to save away, for a rainy day because I was already mostly in the red. So the days I had a little bit, I would skim a little bit away and save it. And then I spend the rest of it on whatever needed to be taken care of. But let me tell you something. There was always a rainy day around the corner. Okay. And so by doing this, I was repeating the same patterns of my past. And I always found myself living paycheck to paycheck. And while it got me by, I was always one day away from being broke. Okay, truth be told, there was many times when I was actually broke, all right? And there were days that I had to choose between eating and putting gas in my car, me eating or feeding my child, choosing between paying a late rent fee and paying daycare for my daughter, or choosing between paying my car insurance or paying my car notes. But I hid it well. I hid it from everybody. And what I do was I just denied the hunger pains in my stomach when my coworkers asked me to go to lunch. I'd be like, I'm not hungry, knowing that my stomach was turning inside out. Then when they asked me to go out with them, I tell them I had to stay home because I didn't have time enough to find a babysitter. Or there were times when the babysitter excuse wasn't going to work. So I would be like, okay, I need to take a nap first. And I would fall asleep and stay asleep, not wake up on time purposely. So I had an excuse not to go because I was too embarrassed to let anybody in on my secret. And that secret was I just didn't have a dime to my name. Couldn't even pull out $20 out of the ATM machine. And then there were some ATM machines back in the day where you can pull out $10, and I couldn't even pull that out. And then to top it off, I did eventually marry my daughter's father, and he had got orders to go to Korea. But even worse, he didn't have any money since either. So we were both in a bad way. The difference was he had a lot of debt and he had just crashed his car and insurance went up. And so, there's that too. And then we had just moved into a roomier, slightly more expensive apartment when he got orders. And so I had already been carrying the family and carrying the financial load because that's what a good wife does. And I was so bent on not having my daughter struggle that I did whatever I could. And I was robbing Peter to pay Paul. And while I was at home with our infant daughter, struggling to meet our basic needs, he was over there spending frivolously, y'all. I couldn't splurge. There was no splurging for me. There was no shopping sprees, no regular nail care. Couldn't, hang out with the girls all the time. And my only splurge was my hair, because if my hair wasn't together, I was going to hear it at my job. But anyway, I did whatever I could just to keep the lights on and the bills paid. And then while he's over there spending the credit cards, as that credit card balance went up and as it crept up, so did my stress levels. And then I starved myself financially, emotionally, and physically to make up the difference. The higher my stress levels rose, the more often I found myself in the emergency room. And after several visits with a negative lab results every single time, they couldn't find anything. One day the ER doctor said to me, he said, Kamille, there is nothing wrong with you. Stress undealt with will kill you, and you're stressed. So you need to go figure out what's going on in your life, figure out the source of all of this stress. And you need to go see a counselor, talk to somebody, figure this thing out, or it will kill you. Wake up call. He was absolutely right. I was in mental turmoil, okay? Because I was broke. I didn't know how I was going to pay the bills. I didn't know. It was so much going on in my life. I was afraid to tell anybody, afraid to get help. And I longed for more at the same time, but I didn't know how to get more. So thankfully, I'm fast forwarding a few years. Thankfully, after 2 divorces and losing pretty much everything both times, I found someone who made me think differently about money. He literally told me that we couldn't date until I was out of debt. And he said, completely out of debt. Now, I got a little attitude because I was like, why you want to know what kind of money I got? Like, I'm not taking care of another man. I'm not taking care of another man. But you don't need to see mine. And he said, well, I have assets to protect. Touche. And so what he did was, instead of me getting a whole attitude and everything, I realized that he was a godsend. And he took me down to his financial planner and to get all of my, finances in my financial affairs in order. And so that was like the best thing that anyone had ever done for me. And then he began to explain to me how money worked. And then he started helping me create a savings plan and invest. And he showed me how to budget and get a life. And he made me get a life insurance policy. He sat right there next to me and made me get a life insurance policy. And he also helped me create an emergency fund. And I mean, everything that you can think about, he covered that for me. And I'm so grateful that he was in my life at that time. And I began to feel this sense of financial and emotional freedom that I had never known, never experienced in my life. But then something else happened. Our relationship ended. We had, brought into this world a brand new baby girl. And in my immaturity, I canceled some of my financial plans. Thankfully, my advisor talked me into keeping the rest of them, but I did let some very important things go. And it was then that I realized that I had these limiting beliefs about money that was tied to some relationships and things that I had learned along the way. So some things I had picked up were things like, I had these ideas that kept me stuck. And one of them was only lucky people were rich. And whether they were lucky because they were born into money or married into money or inherited money or hit the lotto, I didn't fit in any of those categories. And y'all, I lived in Louisiana and there were casinos all around me, but I was just too cheap. Actually, I didn't have enough money to gamble. Okay. $20 was my limit. And oftentimes I would only spend $5 because I couldn't bear to part with the rest, so I had decided that I would never be rich because none of that pertained to me. And money was scary. That whole riches to rags story, I saw how easy it was to go from riches to rags. And I was emotionally scarred. So I decided that I'd rather stay comfortable, even if comfort was knowing how to live poor. And every time I reached a certain level of money in my account, I found a way to bring it back down to what was comfortable, which was being poor. I know how to operate in poor. And people, another idea that I had was people with money are money hungry. They're mean spirited. They make their monies off the backs of the less fortunate. They're crooks. And I was none of those things. And so again, I made the decision that I'd rather be poor than to be looked at in that way. Another thought I had was I didn't come from money. So what makes me think I can have money? And would I be able to do what I need to do with the money? Be a good steward of it. But that terrible, am I worthy enough belief kept haunting me. I had seen so many people in my family with gifts that far exceeded the talent of some of the rich and famous be looked over and passed over. I saw how their lives, they were doing well, and then something happened and they came crashing down. And so I thought, what makes me any different? What makes me special enough or unique enough to deserve more? Yeah, that thought haunted me. Another thing I heard, and I think I probably got it a lot in church or something like that, and I love my church, y'all, I'm a believer, but money is the root of all evil, which I found out later on that it's often misquoted, and it's for the love of money is the root of all evil, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's some conditions with that. And so I was like, oh, if money is the root of all evil, I'm not evil, I don't want it. And then I heard stuff like, the scripture was in Mark 10:25, where it says, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of God. So if I'm rich, that means I got a real small chance, almost a no chance of going to heaven. I ain't want that either. And what about it's better to give than to receive, where people were, pressured into giving their very last when they had nothing left. And my parents were ministers as well. So I was on the other side of that, saw them give everything that we have to have nothing in return while we're sitting at home with no lights on. So the scriptures and the sayings. And again, like I said, I'm a believer. But it seemed as if there was a feeling of fear and lack that was instilled in me rather than an abundance mindset that I've come to know as an adult. And I'd often struggle with, the difference between what was enough and what was too much and how that related to, my chances of going to heaven. And another thing that I thought was rich people are selfish. That kind of like, if you have money, you should give it to the needy and less fortunate. Because I heard a lot of people, you can't take it with you to the grave. So why are you saving all that money? Or another one is, you should enjoy life now because you can't enjoy it when you're dead, And a lot of people try to put you on a guilt trip, talking about how, you have it and you see me in need. And they'll call you selfish because you won't give them what they want from you. Because they think that you just got more than enough and that you ain't gonna miss it if you give it to them. And so those ideas were deeply embedded in me. And every time I made a monetary transaction of any sort, you guys, when somebody would ask me for something, my friends, my family, I would get ill. They would send me into an emotional tailspin, so much so that I had to ask some of my family members, please don't ask me for anything, because it pains me to have to say no. They didn't know I didn't have it all. They expected or thought that I did, but it would literally cause me so much emotional distress that I would get sick. And then it also set me in this tailspin that I couldn't even make a decision. I could not make a decision, or I would end up making that wrong decision and give that person who didn't have no money sense, couldn't budget to save their life and had no way of paying me back. I would give them the money that I knew I didn't have. And then I would be frustrated with myself. I would be stressed out and I would be sick yet again. And I could do a whole keynote on the connection between stress and negative physical health, but I'm gonna stay on topic and just let you know that stress caused me irreparable damage to my body. And not understanding money or having a negative relationship with the money will definitely keep you from having it. And I didn't have it. But in the last few years of my career, I knew that things would be changing and I had to make a change. Again, I wanted more. I've always wanted more. I just didn't know I could have more. I didn't know how to get more. But I knew I wanted more for me. I wanted more for my children, more for my legacy, more for my extended family, more for my friends. And I began seeking out ways to increase, to make what I had more. So I started going to seminar after seminar, but nothing changed. Then I paid for program after program and still nothing changed. I bought book after self-help book and nothing changed. And it wasn't until I began listening to the voices of those who understood that the foundation of all success is mindset that my life began to change. See, all those seminars, those programs in their books, they'll give you a blueprint, they'll give you the process, but they often miss the most fundamental and foundational part of success. Confronting the relationships you have with money and words, and uncovering those limiting beliefs and roadblocks to your success. And after finding the right tribe, the right mentors, and the right coaches, I realized that I would never be successful unless I first decided to. You heard what I just said. Yes, success is a decision. Earl Nightingale says it, and I love the way he says it, but he says, those who have decided to have more. Let that sink in for a minute. Those who have decided to have more. You have to take the first step, and you have to decide that you want more. And like for some people, decision making is so hard. It's hard business for them. They're used to going with the flow. They're used to being told what to do. They don't have to think about it. Like coming in the military, I'm told what to wear, where to be, what job I'm going to have, how to wear my hair, how to lace up my boots, the whole nine. And they're waiting for someone else to tell them what to do. Then they compromise what they truly want and desire for themselves because somebody else wants something and desires them to do something else. Or they hear those voices of all the people who told them in the past that they couldn't, even when they know they can. And they'll often sabotage their decision, because of the ideas, opinions, and voices of other people. And I know this firsthand because I was there. But I'm thankful that someone reminded me that nothing worth having comes easy. And my decisions got tested frequently. And it seemed like the moment I made a decision, something or someone would come along and remind me why I made the wrong decision. And I remember when I was first stepping out on faith, betting on myself, deciding to be an entrepreneur, there were people in my life who didn't understand my passion and my drive. And they were like, what are you doing? Like this, I don't get it. You could be doing all of this, but I was choosing to do something different. They didn't understand why I was spending so much money investing in my personal development. And I'm sure their uninvited opinions were given because they were actually trying to protect me from being scammed or being taken advantage of. But in that season of my life, and the season that I'm still in, I was so set on my decision that I would get ornery, as the old folks used to say. And I would be like, you don't understand my passion and my drive because God didn't give you this vision. He gave it to me. Thank you, but no thank you. If you don't have nothing positive to say, keep moving. And I meant that. But at the same time, after those conversations, after I stood up so boldly for myself, I remember going in my room, getting on my bed and being like, did I make the right decision? I was wondering if I was wasting my time, with all these ideas that I was starting to have and these crazy and wild dreams that I was having. I questioned whether it could truly happen for me. And I decided to treat those opinions like the distractions that they were, because I'm like, if I feel so strongly about it, I know that I'm this far away from cracking that, code, this far away. And so I treated them like distractions. And then I started listening to my coaches and my mentors who had experienced that, and they knew what I was going through, but somehow they still made it through. They gave me hope. And then I thought about it. I was like, isn't that something? We'll listen to people who try to sway us away from doing stuff that they've never even attempted to do. Not just attempted and failed, but stuff they've never even attempted to do. They can tell you all the things the reasons why you shouldn't do it, yet they've never even attempted it. Or they might have attempted something and failed at it, but they don't tell you the whole story, like the part where they didn't do their part because they were supposed to follow a system, a process or whatever, and they only half did it. And so they got the results based on their effort. You don't put a lot of effort in, you don't get a lot out, but they don't tell you that part. And what I found was they too struggled with their self-worth. I really believe that they didn't have a strong enough belief in themselves that it could happen for them too. But, I digress. But anyway, so the more I began to dive into what I believe is my purpose, I truly believe it's my purpose, the more I began hearing those voices in my head again. So when you hear those things, or when I heard those things for years and years and years, you know, those thoughts and repeated and things like that, they begin to create deep grooves of memory in your mind. And anytime you steer off that usual path, or, you try to do something different, your mind will sabotage. No, it tries to protect you. That muscle memory is what we call it, by putting you back on the path of least resistance. But the key is that you have to create new grooves of new belief so that the new belief then becomes your default setting. So how do you do that, you may ask? And I'm glad you asked.
I hope you've enjoyed this excerpt from the Women's Building Wealth Together conference. To hear the rest of the talk and access many, many other wonderful talks, go to jjclink.com/VIP. That's jjclink.com/VIP. Y'all take care and be blessed.
Love the podcast? Be sure to like, subscribe, and forward to 3 friends. You can ask a question or take a life-changing class at buildingwealthtogether.com. Now, go walk in abundance and leave a legacy.